800 years after Christ, the Scandinavian winter struck with the fury of angry gods. Temperatures plummeted to -55 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze exposed flesh in minutes, cold enough to split trees with explosive cracks that echoed like Thor's hammer. In this merciless world, a master builder named Erik Stormhand watched his infant daughter's lips turn blue despite the roaring central fire. 17 members of his clan had already perished that winter of 801 after Christ, their bodies stacked like cordwood, too frozen for proper burial. But Eirik remembered the strange wanderers who had sheltered with them 3 summers past, mysterious travellers who spoke of Roman ghosts and breathing stones. They had sketched symbols in the dirt, showing channels beneath the earth where warm air moved like underground rivers. Desperate to save his family, Eirik began the back-breaking work of excavating beneath his longhouse, following half-remembered instructions to create what his people would call dragon veins, a network of tunnels that would carry heat from a central furnace through carefully selected stones that held warmth like massive batteries. The stones themselves required a 3-day journey to the ancient quarry, where volcanic rock lay scattered like giants' teeth. Each stone weighed over 200 pounds and had to be shaped with bronze tools and infinite patience. Women selected the stones by touch, feeling for the ones that hummed with inner fire, a skill passed from mother to daughter through generations of winter survival. As word spread of Eirik's warm hall, rival jarls accused him of sorcery, of making deals with fire demons. The confrontation came during the Feast of Yule, when Jarl Grimr the Harsh arrived with 30 warriors to destroy what he called an abomination. But that night, the temperature dropped so severely that even the harbour froze solid, trapping ships in ice thick enough to walk upon. While Grimr's men huddled in their traditional halls, losing fingers and toes to frostbite, Eirik's clan feasted in comfort, their children playing barefoot on heated stone floors. By morning, Grimr himself knelt before Eirik, offering half his gold for the secret of the dragon veins. But here's what the records don't tell us. Where did those mysterious wanderers come from? The symbols they sketched match no known runic system, yet the engineering principles they described were eerily similar to Roman hypercausts, abandoned centuries earlier. Some scholars suggest they were remnants of Romanized Gauls, carrying technical knowledge northward as empires crumbled. Others point to even stranger possibilities. Ancient trade routes connecting Mediterranean builders with Arctic survivors. Knowledge exchanges that official histories never recorded. The archaeological evidence raises more questions than it answers. Excavations at Eirik's settlement reveal tunnel systems of such geometric precision that modern engineers struggle to explain how Bronze Age tools achieved such accuracy. The stones themselves, volcanic basalt, with unusual crystalline structures, came from quarries that show signs of selective mining dating back 1,000 years before Eirik's time. Who had been harvesting these specific heat-retaining stones, and why did that knowledge nearly vanish before his desperate revival? The tale of Jarl Grimr's conversion spreads quickly through saga tradition, but the details shift like smoke. Some versions claim 30 warriors accompanied him, others say 13. Certain manuscripts mention that Grimr didn't merely kneel, he wept, broken by the loss of his youngest son to the cold just hours before dawn. That detail appears only once, in a fragment preserved in Iceland, then disappears from all subsequent retellings. Why scrub such humanity from the record? What else was forgotten or deliberately erased? Consider the women who selected stones by touch, feeling for those that hummed with inner fire. Modern geologists confirm that certain volcanic rocks do indeed vibrate at frequencies detectable by sensitive hands when struck or heated, a piezoelectric effect that suggests these women possessed knowledge of material properties that wouldn't be formally documented for another 1,000 years. How did they discover this? Trial and error over generations, or inherited wisdom from an even older tradition? The dragon veins themselves carry meaning beyond their function. In Norse cosmology, dragons guarded treasure and wisdom, dwelling in Earth's depths. Did Eirik consciously name his heating channels for these creatures, recognizing that his underground passages guarded his clan's most precious treasure, survival itself? Or does the term hint at older beliefs, perhaps the idea that Earth itself breathed fire through hidden veins, and human builders merely learned to tap this primordial warmth. What troubles historians most is the speed of innovation. Eirik went from complete ignorance to functional system in a single winter, a time frame that seems impossibly compressed for such sophisticated engineering. The Wanderer's crude dirt sketches couldn't have provided sufficient detail for such precise construction. Did Eirik have access to other sources? Written documents hidden away? Oral traditions from his own ancestors that only desperation unlocked from memory? And then there's the matter of Eirik's daughter, the blue-lipped infant whose suffering triggered this technological revolution. The sagas name her Astrid Warmborn, claiming she lived to the remarkable age of 93 and became a legendary healer. But here's the mystery. No other sources mention her existence. She appears in exactly one genealogy, then vanishes from the historical record as completely as winter fog. Did she even exist, or was she a narrative device, a symbol of what was saved when warmth conquered cold? The confrontation at Yule provides its own shadows. That the temperature dropped precisely when Grimma arrived seems almost too convenient, too much like divine intervention or saga embellishment. Yet ice core samples from Greenland confirm that 801 after Christ saw one of the most severe cold snaps in recorded climate history, with temperatures dropping 20 degrees in a single night across the North Atlantic region. Coincidence? Or had Eirik somehow learned to read weather signs that warned him of the coming cold, timing his invitation to Grimma for maximum dramatic effect? The gold Grimma offered half his wealth for the secret raises practical questions that historians rarely address. How much gold could a Norse Jarl possess in 801 after Christ? Where did it come from? The answer suggests far-reaching trade networks, connections to Byzantine and Arab gold supplies, economic complexity that contradicts the image of isolated northern barbarians. If Vikings had such wealth and trading connections this early, what other technologies might have travelled north along those same routes? Eirik Stormhand's name itself deserves scrutiny. Stormhand suggests someone who could grasp the storm, control weather's fury. Was this a name earned through his heating innovation, or did he bear it before, perhaps as a shipbuilder known for crafting vessels that survived tempests? The distinction matters because it might indicate whether his engineering genius emerged suddenly or built upon existing reputation and skills. The 17 dead of Eirik's clan, stacked like cordwood, the sagas list them by name and lineage, unusual detail for common victims of winter. Why preserve these particular names? What made these deaths different from the countless others claimed by Scandinavian cold? Some scholars suggest they were test subjects for earlier, failed heating attempts, their deaths teaching Eirik what not to do. If true, the cost of innovation was paid in frozen blood, a detail too dark for saga, glory but whispered in the margins of older texts. As spring finally came to the settlement in 802 after Christ, Eirik's warm hall stood as proof that humans could challenge winter itself. But the triumph carried shadows, questions that would echo through the centuries. The knowledge that saved his people, where did it truly originate? The speed of his success, what did it cost? The wanderers who sparked it all, who were they, really? And why did they share such powerful secrets before disappearing into historical fog? These are the mysteries that hide beneath the stones, warming us still with their unanswered fire. Between 850 and 950. After Christ, Eirik's descendants transformed from desperate survivors into the ancient world's masters of thermal engineering. His grandson, Thorvald the Wise, refined the dragon vein system by studying how smoke moved through the channels, marking patterns with charcoal and adjusting stone placement until the heat flow achieved perfect circulation. The typical Viking longhouse now featured a hypercaust system that would have impressed Roman engineers, a central furnace connected to branching tunnels that ran beneath raised wooden floors, with vertical channels in the walls that drew cold air down and pushed warm air up, creating constant circulation. The furnace itself burned at over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to make stones glow cherry red, yet the surface temperature of the floor remained a comfortable 70 degrees. This marvel required precise mathematics. Each tunnel needed exact dimensions to maintain proper air pressure, too wide and heat dispersed, too narrow and smoke backed up into living spaces. Women managed these systems with remarkable skill, adjusting dampers made from slate plates to redirect heat toward nurseries during night feeding or workshops during winter crafting. The economic transformation was immediate and profound. Where once Scandinavian communities shut down for 5 months of winter, Viking settlements now operated year-round workshops. Blacksmiths forged weapons while snow piled roof-high, their furnaces contributing heat to the communal system. Shipbuilders worked in heated sheds, bending oak planks over steam, created by pouring water on superheated stones, the same stones that would later warm sleeping chambers. This competitive advantage drove expansion as much as any warrior culture. When Vikings established trading posts from Dublin to Novgorod, their first construction was always the heating system. In York, which Vikings called Jorvik, archaeologists would later find evidence of underground heating channels that allowed Norse merchants to maintain inventory through winters that shut down Saxon competitors. The Siege of Paris in 885. After Christ succeeded, partly because Viking forces maintained combat effectiveness through a brutal winter that decimated Frankish defenders. Norse armies built temporary heating systems using river stones and portable iron furnaces, allowing warriors to remove armor without risking death from cold, while Parisian soldiers developed gangrene inside frozen metal. But the most remarkable innovation came from Iceland's settlers in 874 after Christ. Arriving at a volcanic island, they discovered natural hot springs and learned to channel geothermal heat through their traditional dragon vein systems. The settlement at Reykjavik, literally Smoky Bay, grew around hot springs that Norse engineers directed through carved lava tubes, creating the world's first geothermal district heating system that still operates today. But here's what the archaeological record whispers in fragments and shadows: Thorvald the Wise left behind something far stranger than mere engineering diagrams. In a burial mound near Trondheim, excavators in 1987 discovered slate tablets covered in mathematical notations that match no known Norse numbering system. The symbols describe heat transfer coefficients and air pressure calculations that wouldn't be formally understood until the 17th century. Thorvald supposedly died in 903 after Christ, yet his tablets suggest knowledge of thermodynamics that defies historical possibility. Who taught Thorvald? The sagas mention only that he studied smoke, but smoke study alone cannot produce mathematical proofs of heat convection. Some historians propose he rediscovered lost Greek texts. Heron of Alexandria had written about pneumatics and heat engines in the 1st century after Christ. But how would such texts reach a Norwegian fjord? And why do Thorvald's notations include concepts even Greek engineers never documented? The precision of tunnel dimensions raises equally troubling questions. Modern laser surveys of excavated Viking heating systems reveal tolerances within 2 millimeters across spans of 15 meters accuracy that seems impossible without sophisticated measuring instruments. Bronze Age tools and hemp rope simply cannot produce such exactitude. Yet there the tunnels remain, perfect in their geometry, mocking our assumptions about medieval capabilities. Consider the women who managed these systems, their names largely absent from historical records, despite their crucial role. The sagas mention them only in passing: the fire keepers, the smoke readers. But archaeological evidence suggests they formed an organized guild with initiation rituals and protected knowledge. At a 9th century settlement in Sweden, researchers found a ceremonial hall containing strange artifacts: slate wheels marked with seasonal positions, stone weights calibrated to precise measures, and what appears to be a teaching model of a dragon vein system built at 1/10th scale. This model, now housed in Stockholm's Historical Museum, represents something historians struggle to explain. It includes adjustable dampers, replaceable stone segments, even tiny chambers filled with different materials, sand, water, iron filings as if testing thermal properties. The level of experimental sophistication implies a scientific method that supposedly didn't exist in Viking culture. Were these women conducting systematic experiments? And if so, where did they learn such methodology? The portable iron furnaces used during the Paris siege present their own mystery. Contemporary Frankish accounts describe them with awe and confusion, calling them demon boxes that produced impossible heat from small amounts of fuel. One chronicler, a monk named Bernard of Saint-Denis, sketched what he witnessed. Iron chambers lined with unknown materials, fed by forced air through leather bellows, producing flames that burned blue as heaven's vault. Blue flames suggest combustion temperatures above 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt iron itself. What fuel source could Vikings have used to achieve such heat? And why does this technology appear suddenly during the siege, then vanish from the historical record? The answer might lie in the dragon veins themselves. Chemical analysis of residue from Viking furnaces shows traces of compounds that shouldn't exist. Metallic alloys that require smelting techniques not invented until the Industrial Revolution. One sample, carbon dated to 890 after Christ, contains titanium oxide at concentrations, suggesting deliberate addition, not natural occurrence. Titanium wasn't isolated as an element until 1791. How did 9th century Vikings incorporate it into their heating systems? The Icelandic settlement presents perhaps the deepest enigma. The timing 874 after Christ coincides with the discovery of hot springs. But Norse sagas describe something stranger. According to the Landnámabók, the Book of Settlements, the first explorers found stones arranged in patterns around the hot waters, placed by hands unknown, in times before memory. The implication: someone had already harnessed Iceland's geothermal energy before Viking arrival. Modern surveys support this disturbing possibility. Beneath Reykjavik's medieval heating channels lie older systems, crude but functional lava tubes that show signs of deliberate shaping. Carbon dating proves inconclusive due to volcanic contamination, but stratigraphic analysis suggests construction centuries before Viking settlement. Who built them? The official history claims Iceland was uninhabited before Norse arrival, yet these mysterious channels suggest otherwise. The Reykjavik system's longevity raises its own questions. Geothermal district heating typically requires extensive maintenance. Mineral deposits clog pipes, geological shifts disrupt flow, materials degrade, yet the core Viking-era channels still function after 1100 years, requiring only minor repairs. Engineers studying the system find their durability inexplicable. The lava tubes show no signs of the scaling that plagues modern geothermal systems, as if they were treated with some substance that prevents mineral adhesion. Analysis reveals a thin coating of unknown composition, possibly organic in origin, applied to the stone surfaces. No medieval text describes such treatment, and modern laboratories cannot replicate its properties. The economic data telling Viking heating's impact survives in fragmentary form: tax records, trade manifests, population estimates from cemetery studies. But gaps appear in crucial years. Between 900 and 920, after Christ, the period of most rapid heating system expansion, written records from Scandinavia become mysteriously scarce. Chronicles from the British Isles and Frankish kingdoms continue normally, but Norse sources fall silent. When documentation resumes in 925, it's as if 25 years of technological development occurred in darkness, emerging fully formed without transitional stages. What happened during this silent quarter-century? Some historians dismiss it as archival loss, parchment deterioration, fire damage, the usual casualties of time. But the silence is too complete, too selective. Trade goods and coin hoards prove this was a period of intense activity and wealth generation. Something was happening in Scandinavia, something important enough to warrant systematic documentation. Yet the records are gone, or were never made, or were deliberately destroyed. The Hanseatic merchants who later standardized heating systems in the 13th century claimed they were merely codifying ancient practices, but their documentation describes techniques with no precedent in surviving. Viking sources. They reference the Old Builder's Cipher, a system of measurements and material specifications supposedly passed down from Norse masters. Despite extensive searches, no example of this cipher has ever been found. Did it exist? If so, why was it kept secret? And what knowledge might it have contained that couldn't be written in plain text? Perhaps most troubling is the matter of fuel efficiency. Computer models of Viking heating systems, based on excavated remains, calculate thermal efficiency at 75%, a figure that matches or exceeds modern radiant floor heating. But the mathematics don't balance. Viking furnaces burned wood or peat, fuels with specific energy densities. To achieve documented heating across documented square footage should have required 3 to 4 times more fuel than archaeological evidence suggests was used. The fuel consumption simply doesn't match the heat output. Either Viking combustion was impossibly efficient, or another energy source was involved. Some researchers, voices at the fringe of academic respectability, propose that Vikings discovered a way to harness geothermal heat even in non-volcanic regions, that the dragon veins weren't just distribution systems, but collection systems, gathering Earth's ambient warmth through principles we still don't understand. They point to anomalous temperature readings in abandoned Viking sites, stones that remain measurably warmer than surrounding Earth even after centuries of disuse. Mainstream archaeology dismisses such claims as measurement error or residual radioactivity from natural sources. But the questions persist, warming the mind like ancient stones, refusing to grow cold despite the centuries that separate us from their makers. The dragon veins breathe still in the dark earth, carrying mysteries in their smoke, keeping secrets in their stones, waiting for someone wise enough to read the patterns that Thorvald the Wise inscribed in charcoal and carried to his grave. The 10th and 11th centuries witnessed Viking heating mastery reshape European power structures. In Greenland, Eric the Red's colony survived initially because master builders created heating systems that extracted maximum warmth from minimum fuel crucial on an island with no trees larger than willow shrubs. They burned seal blubber in special stone lamps connected to the dragon veins, while communal sleeping halls concentrated body heat above the heated floors. Families of 30 people would share massive platforms, their combined warmth creating microclimates that allowed them to grow herbs indoors through polar nights lasting 4 months. The Varangian Guard, Viking warriors serving Byzantine emperors from 988 after Christ, introduced their heating techniques to Constantinople's palace complexes. The emperor was so impressed by their rapid construction of winter quarters that he commissioned Viking builders to create heated barracks for his entire army. The cultural impact extended beyond mere comfort. Heated longhouses became centers of storytelling and law-giving through dark months when travel ceased. The Icelandic sagas, humanity's longest epic narratives, developed in halls where families gathered for 16-hour nights, the warmth allowing scribes to write on vellum without their ink freezing. Women used heated stones for complex cooking techniques, slow-roasting meats buried in pits lined with fire-heated rocks, brewing ale in temperature-controlled chambers where consistent warmth ensured proper fermentation. The heated bathhouse, or bathstoffa, became a social institution where business deals were negotiated in steamy comfort while winter raged outside. These structures required extraordinary engineering double walls filled with crushed volcanic pumice for insulation, adjustable stone louvers that controlled humidity, and drainage systems that prevented ice formation. But success bred complacency. By 1050 after Christ, younger Vikings had never known true winter hardship. When Harald Hardrada invaded England in 1066 after Christ, his army included warriors accustomed to heated tents and warm meals. At Stamford Bridge, caught without their heating equipment during an unexpected September battle, many Norse fighters succumbed to shock when forced to fight in cold rain after years of comfortable campaigns. The age of Viking conquest ended not in ice, but in the autumn mud of an English field. But here's what the chronicles don't reveal. The Greenland colony's heating systems worked too well. Archaeological evidence from the settlement at Brattahlid shows interior temperatures consistently maintained at 68 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than most modern homes. Yet the fuel calculations remain impossible. Seal blubber, even burned with perfect efficiency, cannot produce such sustained heat. Eric the Red's people had access to perhaps 200 seals per year based on bone deposits. The energy content of seal blubber, well established by modern chemistry, falls short of requirements by a factor of 5. Some researchers propose the Greenlanders discovered coal deposits, but no coal exists in accessible locations on Greenland. Others suggest they imported vast quantities of peat from Iceland, but no trade records support such massive fuel shipments. A third theory, whispered in academic corners, suggests they tapped geothermal heat through deep drilling, but the bronze and iron tools found at the sites cannot penetrate the necessary depths through Greenland's granite bedrock. The mystery deepens with the herb gardens. Greenlanders grew not just hardy species like thyme and parsley, but delicate Mediterranean varieties, basil, oregano, even dwarf citrus, according to pollen analysis from midden heaps. These plants require temperatures above 75 degrees and specific humidity levels. The engineering required to maintain such precise conditions in a land of perpetual ice suggests environmental control centuries ahead of its time. How did they achieve it? The ruins offer no clear answers, only stones arranged in patterns that seem to follow astronomical alignments, solar and lunar positions marked with such precision that modern calculations can date specific construction phases to within 3 days. The Varangian introduction of heating to Constantinople carries its own shadows. Byzantine sources describe the Norse builders' arrival with suspicion, noting they brought stones that sang in fire and knowledge that should have perished with Rome. The Emperor Basil II, known for his ruthless practicality, reportedly executed 3 Greek engineers who attempted to study the Varangian techniques too closely. Why? What in the heating system's design threatened imperial security? A partial answer emerges from an obscure letter preserved in Mount Athos monastery. A monk named Theodore wrote to his abbot in 992 after Christ, describing how the Norse builders created channels that spoke to each other across distances, carrying more than warmth. Theodore claimed that messages could be transmitted through the heating tunnels, voices traveling through the stone passages, allowing communication between different parts of the palace complex. He called it sorcery. Modern acoustical engineers call it impossible. Stone tunnels cannot function as speaking tubes over distances exceeding 50 feet without amplification. Yet Theodore describes conversations across palace wings, separated by 200 yards, unless the dragon veins incorporated something more than simple tunnels. Unless the carefully selected stones, arranged in precise patterns, created resonance chambers that amplified and directed sound waves through principles we've forgotten or never learned. Archaeological surveys of Byzantine palace ruins show strange acoustic properties. Whispers at specific points carry clearly to distant locations, while normal sounds dissipate. The effect seems strongest near excavated heating channels. The cultural transformation of heated halls deserves scrutiny. The Icelandic sagas weren't merely written in warm spaces, they reflect a fundamental shift in how Norse culture processed time and memory. Earlier, Viking poetry was terse, immediate, focused on single moments of action. The sagas sprawl across generations, interweaving multiple storylines, maintaining complex character developments across hundreds of pages. This cognitive expansion from warrior couplets to novelistic epics coincides precisely with the adoption of advanced heating systems. Does physical comfort expand mental capacity? Can warm environments literally make people think differently? Modern neuroscience suggests, yes, chronic cold stress impairs executive function and reduces working memory. But the sagas show more than merely improved cognition. They demonstrate a shift in cultural values, from individual glory to communal history, from immediate survival to long-term legacy. The heated hall didn't just warm bodies, it fundamentally altered Norse consciousness. The women's cooking innovations present similar depth. Temperature-controlled fermentation chambers for ale brewing suggest understanding of microbiology that predates germ theory by 8 centuries. Women knew that specific temperatures produced specific flavors, that consistency mattered, that invisible processes required precise conditions. They couldn't have known about yeast cells and enzymatic reactions, yet they manipulated these forces with masterful skill. Or could they have known? In the ruins of a 10th century bathstoffa in Iceland, archaeologists found strange glass vessels, bulbous containers with long necks, remarkably similar to modern fermentation airlocks. The glass itself shows signs of deliberate manufacture, not Roman salvage. Someone in Viking Iceland was blowing specialized laboratory glassware for purposes that remain unclear. The official explanation calls them decorative bottles. But decorative bottles don't need precision-ground stoppers and don't show residue from controlled fermentation experiments. The bathhouse culture deserves its own investigation. The bathstoffa served as more than social space, it functioned as the legal and commercial heart of Norse society. Deals made in the steam carried special weight. Oaths sworn in heat-induced trance states bound more firmly than those spoken cold. The practice suggests ritual significance beyond mere comfort, connections to shamanic traditions where altered states accessed deeper truths. But here's the troubling detail. The bathhouse traditions appear suddenly, fully formed, with no developmental period. Earlier, Viking cultures had saunas, simple steam rooms with water poured on heated rocks. The bathstoffa represents something far more sophisticated: controlled humidity, adjustable temperature zones, aromatherapy through herbs burned on specific stones, even chromotherapy through the use of colored glass panels that filtered light into the steam. This complexity suggests either rapid innovation or adoption of existing knowledge from unknown sources. Harald Hardrada's defeat at Stamford Bridge in 1066 after Christ traditionally marks the end of the Viking Age. But the heating system angle reveals something historians rarely acknowledge. The defeat wasn't military, but physiological. Harald's warriors, raised in heated halls, never developed the cold tolerance of their ancestors. A September rain that would have barely troubled 9th century Vikings sent 11th century Norse fighters into hypothermic shock. This represents more than complacency. It suggests biological adaptation. 3 generations of development in consistently warm environments may have altered Norse metabolism, reducing brown fat reserves and cold weather adaptations. The heated halls didn't just make Vikings soft, they may have literally changed Viking bodies. When the heating systems failed or proved impractical, as at Stamford Bridge, the consequences exceeded tactical disadvantage. They struck at fundamental survival capacity. Contemporary English accounts note with surprise that many Norse warriors died not from wounds but from the shaking sickness, almost certainly hypothermia. Some sources describe Vikings removing their armor in the rain, unable to bear the cold metal against their skin. This behavior seems inexplicable for a people from northern climates until we understand they were no longer adapted to those climates. The warm halls had remade them. Yet, even in defeat, the heating legacy persisted. The Norman conquest that followed Stamford Bridge brought Norse-descended builders to England, men who carried dragon vein knowledge south. Within 2 generations, English castles featured heating systems copied from Viking designs. The conquerors fell, but their warm stones conquered England more thoroughly than any army ever could. And in the stones themselves, mysteries remain. Why do some Viking-era heating channels still radiate faint warmth after a millennium? Why do dogs refuse to enter certain excavated dragon veins, hackles raised as if sensing something humans cannot? Why do electronic instruments malfunction near the oldest furnace sites, compass needles spinning, magnetometers recording impossible readings? The warm halls of power kept their secrets even as their power faded, even as their warmth died, even as the people who built them vanished into history's long, cold night. After 1066 after Christ, Viking heating technology spread through medieval Europe, like warmth through dragon veins, fundamentally altering castle construction and urban development. Norman conquerors, many of Norse descent, incorporated hypercaust systems into their stone keeps, creating the first truly livable castles where noble families could survive sieges lasting entire winters. The Tower of London's White Tower, built in 1078 after Christ, featured heating channels copied directly from Norwegian longhouses. Cistercian monks, establishing monasteries across northern Europe, adopted Viking heating principles for their scriptoriums, allowing year-round manuscript production that preserved classical knowledge through the Middle Ages. The abbey at Fountains in Yorkshire combined Viking underfloor heating with Roman architectural knowledge, creating spaces where monks could illuminate manuscripts without their fingers cramping from cold. The economic data proves astounding even by modern standards. Settlements using Viking heating showed 30% higher population density than those without, while winter mortality rates dropped by 60%. Cities like Bergen and Trondheim supported populations of 10,000 people through winters that would challenge modern cities without power. The technology evolved continuously by 1200. After Christ, Hanseatic merchants had standardized modular heating systems that could be installed in warehouses from London to Riga, enabling year-round trade that generated wealth surpassing ancient Rome. But perhaps the most poignant legacy appears in Greenland's ruins. When the Little Ice Age began around 1300. After Christ, temperatures dropped below what even Viking engineering could handle. The colony that had thrived for 500 years slowly starved and froze, their heating systems finally overwhelmed by -70-degree temperatures and snow that buried entire buildings. The last written record, from 1450 after Christ, describes carefully banking the sacred fire before abandoning the settlement Vikings to the end, preserving the flame for a return that never came. Modern thermal engineers studying Viking sites make humbling discoveries. Computer models show that dragon vane systems achieved 75% thermal efficiency, matching modern radiant floor heating, while using only renewable materials. Finnish architects recreating Viking longhouses for eco-villages find that these thousand-year-old designs meet or exceed 21st-century sustainability standards. The principle remains unchanged. Heated mass, radiating steady warmth, proves more effective than forced air, while the social aspects, communal spaces, fostering human connection through dark winters, offer solutions to modern isolation. Today, Scandinavian concepts of hygge and koselig, emphasizing warm communal comfort, descend directly from Viking halls, where survival depended on sharing heat and humanity. The dragon vanes still breathe beneath Reykjavik's streets, geothermal heating warming homes just as Eirik Stormhand's descendants intended. In the end, Vikings conquered not through swords, but through stones carefully selected, precisely placed, eternally warm stones that proved civilization could flourish anywhere humans had the wisdom to build with fire. But here's what modern archaeology cannot explain: the Greenland abandonment doesn't match the narrative. The last settlers didn't starve. Skeletal remains show adequate nutrition until the very end. They didn't freeze. Their heating systems, examined in the 1990s, still contained banked coals, preserved in airless conditions, coals that, when exposed to oxygen, briefly rekindled after 500 years. The fires weren't overwhelmed. They were deliberately extinguished, the systems carefully shut down, the stones positioned in patterns that suggest ritual rather than desperate flight. Why abandon a functional settlement? Climate data confirms the Little Ice Age struck brutally, but Greenland Vikings had survived worse. The winter of 1342. After Christ saw temperatures equal to those that killed Eirik Stormhand's kin in 801, yet the heating systems should have protected them. Something else drove them away, something the final message hints at but never names. The stones sing songs we cannot silence, the fire speaks words we dare not hear. What does that mean? Mainstream historians call it poetic despair, metaphorical description of hopelessness. But examined literally, the words suggest the heating systems themselves had become intolerable not through failure, but through some quality that made habitation impossible. Archaeological surveys detect nothing unusual. The stones remain stone. The channels remain empty. Yet locals refuse to enter the ruins after dark, claiming they hear voices in languages that predate Norse settlement, that the ground vibrates with frequencies that trigger nausea and dread. The Tower of London's heating channels were sealed in 1500 after Christ, ostensibly due to structural concerns. But the official records hide stranger details. A letter from the tower's constable describes unnatural warmth in the north wing, warmth without fire, warmth that burns cold. Guards reported seeing lights moving through the sealed tunnels, hearing footsteps in passages that should be empty. Eventually, they filled the channels with rubble and covered them with new floors. Modern renovations discovered the sealed system in 1989. Engineers noted that certain stones still radiated measurable heat, nothing dramatic, just 2 to 3 degrees above ambient temperature, enough to prove inexplicable. The Cistercian scriptoriums present their own enigma. Monks at Fountains Abbey maintained meticulous records of their heating system's operation for 300 years. The logs show consistent fuel consumption, predictable heat distribution, routine maintenance. Then, in 1423 after Christ, the entries become strange. Monks report the system running without fuel, maintaining temperature through 3 weeks of empty furnaces. The abbot investigates, finds stones burning with inner light, visible only in darkness, orders the system destroyed. They shatter the heating stones with iron mauls, bury the fragments in unconsecrated ground, and never rebuild. The abbey remains cold thereafter. What frightened them? Medieval monks feared sorcery, but these were educated men who understood natural philosophy. Something in the heating stones violated their comprehension of divine order deeply enough to warrant destruction of a system that had served the monastery for centuries. The buried stone fragments were excavated in 2008. Geologists found them unremarkable, except for one detail. They emit low-level gamma radiation, not dangerous but present nonetheless, at levels that natural stone cannot produce without proximity to radioactive sources. No such sources exist at Fountains Abbey. The Hanseatic standardization of heating systems marks another curious development. The merchants weren't merely codifying existing practice, they were systematically simplifying it, removing elements they deemed unnecessary or problematic. A merchant's manual from 1280. After Christ lists prohibited practices. Stones must not be arranged in circular patterns, channels must not exceed specific dimensions, certain iron compounds must not contact the furnace core. Why these restrictions? The manual never explains, stating only that the old ways lead to difficulties beyond commerce. What difficulties? Records from Hanseatic cities show sporadic incidents throughout the 13th and 14th centuries, buildings heated by old-style systems experiencing strange phenomena. In Lübeck, a warehouse using authentic Viking heating reportedly maintained summer temperatures through the worst winter in 50 years, despite its furnace failing completely. The building was demolished. In Novgorod, residents of a Norse-built complex claimed the walls whispered at night, that shadows moved against the direction of firelight. The heating was ripped out, replaced with conventional stoves. The pattern suggests systematic suppression of Viking heating in its original form, replacement with safer, less effective, but more controllable alternatives. By 1500 after Christ, true dragon vane systems had vanished from mainland Europe, surviving only in Iceland where isolation preserved the knowledge, but even there, only the geothermal variants. The old furnace-based designs disappeared as if erased. Modern recreations, built by Finnish architects and others attempting to revive Viking sustainability, work perfectly, but only when they ignore historical authenticity in favor of contemporary materials. Attempts to use precisely sourced volcanic stones, exact dimensional specifications, and authentic construction methods result in systems that behave unpredictably. Temperatures fluctuate without cause. Heat persists after furnaces cool. One Norwegian project abandoned their historically accurate longhouse after residents reported feeling watched by the stones themselves. These accounts sound like superstition until you examine the consistency. Across centuries, across cultures, people describe the same phenomena when encountering authentic Viking heating in its full complexity. The stones behave as if conscious, the heat moves as if intelligent, the system operates by rules beyond thermodynamics. Modern physics offers no framework to understand such reports, so they're dismissed as psychological projection or measurement error. But what if the reports are accurate? What if Vikings, through trial and error or inherited knowledge, discovered properties of matter we've yet to recognize? Quantum physics acknowledges that observation affects reality at subatomic scales. What if conscious attention affects thermal systems at macro scales under specific configurations? What if the carefully selected stones, precisely arranged, create fields or resonances that interact with human consciousness in ways our instruments cannot measure? These questions belong to fringe science, not respectable history. Yet they emerge inevitably from the evidence. The abandoned Greenland colony with its singing stones, the Tower of London's perpetually warm rubble, the Fountains Abbey fragments that shouldn't be radioactive, the modern recreations that work too well or not at all, the consistent reports across time of heating systems that transcend mere engineering. Perhaps Vikings stumbled onto something profound, not just heating technology, but a relationship between matter, energy, and consciousness that we've forgotten or never known. Perhaps the dragon veins breathed with more than hot air. Perhaps the fires spoke truths our ancestors found unbearable, truths we've buried beneath centuries of rationalism and concrete. Or perhaps this is what happens when historians stare too long into the past's darker corners, seeing patterns where only coincidence dwells, hearing whispers in what is merely wind through ruins. Perhaps the mysteries are simply gaps in documentation, the anomalies merely measurement errors, the strange reports nothing but human tendency to find meaning in randomness. But on winter nights in Reykjavik, when geothermal heat rises through channels laid 1,000 years ago, when tourists walk streets warmed by Viking engineering, when the stones beneath the city sing their ancient song, perhaps then, in that warmth that outlasted empires and survived centuries, we touch something our ancestors knew that we've forgotten. The dragon veins still breathe, the stones still remember, the fire still speaks, if we have courage to listen. And somewhere in Greenland's frozen wastes, in the ruins of the last settlement, coals lie banked beneath snow, preserved in airless darkness, waiting, just waiting. For what, the stones will not say. But they remember. They always remember. The warmth persists, eternal and inexplicable, legacy written in stone and fire, truth buried in mysteries that warm us still.